We put so much trust in lawyers with our money, our freedom, sometimes our entire future. It's a massive responsibility. But what happens when that trust gets broken? Who actually holds lawyers accountable? The answer? Well, it's way more complicated than you'd probably think.
Okay, so let's get real for a second. It's a question nobody wants to have to ask, but it happens. What do you actually do when you have a serious problem with your lawyer? Maybe they blew a huge deadline, or worse, mishandled your money. Well, believe it or not, there's actually a whole system built for exactly this problem. Now, let's be super clear here. The vast majority of lawyers are fantastic, ethical people. But for the ones who aren't, the ones who cross the line, yeah, there's a formal system in place. So the big question is, how is this thing supposed to work? All right, here's a really important distinction. This process, it's not about getting your money back. That's a whole other thing. That's a malpractice lawsuit. This is different. This is about upholding the rules of the profession. It's got three big goals, right? Protect the public, that's us, punish the lawyer who messed up, and, maybe most importantly, send a crystal clear message to every other lawyer out there, don't even think about it.
So, to really get our heads around this, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to zoom in on Florida's system. Why Florida? Because they've got this super detailed process mapped out, and it's a perfect case study to see how a complaint goes from a simple phone call all the way to a final decision. Okay, so check out this journey. It all kicks off with what they call an inquiry. If it's got legs, it becomes a formal complaint, and that's when an investigation really starts. Then it goes to a grievance committee, and this is interesting. It's made up of lawyers and regular citizens, and they act kind of like a grand jury. If they say, yep, there's something here, it can go to a hearing. That's a lot like a trial. And from there, it could go all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court.
But here's where it gets wild. Look at this. It's like a giant funnel. In a recent year, the Florida bar got something like 13,000 inquiries. But a whopping 76% of those were closed right away. They never even became a formal complaint. Only about a quarter actually make it past that first step. That's a huge filter right at the beginning. Okay, so what about that small fraction that actually makes it all the way through the gauntlet? What happens if a lawyer is actually found guilty? What's the punishment?
Well, the punishments are all over the map. The absolute worst case scenario for a lawyer is disbarment. That's it. Game over. Your license to practice law is gone. Then you've got suspension, which is like being put in the penalty box for a set amount of time. And then you have the less severe stuff, like a public reprimand or an admonishment. Think of those as a public slap on the wrist. They can still practice, but everyone knows they messed up.
And get this. This is one of those little details that is just mind-blowing. Let's say a lawyer gets a 90-day suspension. When those 90 days are up, they just go back to work. Simple. But if they get a 91-day suspension, just one extra day, it's a whole different ballgame. Now they have to prove they've been rehabilitated just to get their license back. That one single day makes a massive difference. So we've seen how the system is supposed to work in Florida. It looks really structured, right? But when you see that crazy funnel where most complaints just vanish, and you hear about these weirdly specific rules like the 91-day thing, it makes you step back and ask a much bigger question. Who is this system really for? Is it protecting us, the public, or is it protecting the lawyers? And that's where we run into a huge fundamental conflict. Some researchers at Stanford Law School just hit the nail on the head with this one. They point out that bar associations are trying to do two totally different things at once. On one hand, they're supposed to be the regulators, the cops on the beat protecting the public. But on the other hand, they're a professional club, a trade group that exists to look out for lawyers' best interests. And you can see how those two jobs might, clash a lot. So this is what the structure usually looks like. You've got the state Supreme Court at the very top. They have all the power. But they hand off the actual dirty work, the investigating, the disciplining, to the State Bar Association. So what you end up with is a system where the bar regulates its own members, lawyers regulating lawyers. And that is the core of the problem, according to critics. If the people in charge of policing the lawyers are lawyers, well, who are they really looking out for? There's a term for this. It's called regulatory capture. It's this idea that the watchdog ends up protecting the very industry it's supposed to be watching. The priority can shift from protecting the public to protecting the profession's reputation. And the stats? They're pretty shocking. That same Stanford research found that nationwide, something like 9 out of 10 complaints against lawyers just get tossed out, dismissed. That's a staggering number.
And it's a perfect example of what regulatory capture can look like on the ground, a system that seems designed to filter out problems rather than solve them.
So because of this built-in conflict, a lot of really smart people are starting to ask, okay, is there a better way to do this? And that has opened up a whole new conversation with some really creative ideas about how to completely reimagine the whole system.
All right, let's look at some of these new ideas. First up is Model A. On the surface, it looks pretty similar to what we have now. The bar is still running the show. The big change is that they wouldn't just regulate lawyers anymore. Their power would expand to cover all legal service providers, paraprofessionals, legal tech startups, the whole shebang. The pro argument is, hey, it's efficient, we use the structure we already have. The con? Well, it kind of feels like you're just putting the same fox in charge of a much, much bigger henhouse.
Okay, other models try to divide and conquer. Check out Model B. Here, you'd split up the jobs. The Supreme Court would handle the super important task of licensing who gets to be a lawyer in the first place, and the bar would just handle discipline. Then you've got Model C, which takes it even further. It basically creates two separate tracks. The bar keeps its eye on old school lawyers, but a brand new, totally independent regulator is set up to handle all the new stuff, like legal tech companies.
And then things get even more radical. Model D is basically a burn it all down and start over approach. You'd scrap the current system entirely and build one new independent regulator for absolutely everyone. Then there's Model E, which goes in a completely different direction. It suggests taking some of this power away from the courts and giving it to the state legislature. Basically, treat lawyers like we treat doctors or accountants, where the government sets the rules.
You see the common thread here, right? All of these different models are searching for the same thing, a better regulator. So what would that look like? Well, for starters, it would have to be truly independent from the people it's regulating. It would make decisions based on data and evidence, not just how we've always done it. And its number one job, its whole reason for existing, would be to protect the public, period. So after all that, after looking at how the system works now, the built-in conflicts, and all these ideas for the future, it all comes back to one central, massive question. A question about power, about trust, and about how this whole thing is structured. And it really boils down to this, right? Should the people who regulate lawyers be lawyers themselves? With that built-in conflict of interest we talked about, is it even possible for a system of self-regulation to put the public first ahead of its own members? That's the real question here. And how we answer it could change what justice looks like for all of us.